Welcome to your video lesson for Friday, November 9th. You're going to build off of what we did earlier today or yesterday. If you're just watching this on Friday for the first time, expanding quadratics. Just like yesterday, our learning goals were to determine the product of two binomials by expanding using FOIL, converting factored form to standard form, and then a little bit new today, we're going to convert vertex form to standard form. From yesterday, or really from potentially earlier today, we looked at things like this, and so we did kind of changing this into this, and when we did that, it was going from factored to standard. So we expanded a binomial, we ended up with this trinomial, and one thing you're notice too is that the a value for the factored form is 2, and the a value for the standard form is 2. Those a values are always the same. And then doing something a little bit different, coming soon, we went from, or we will go from that way to that way, so from standard to factored. Just to give you a quick refresher of what we did earlier today and or yesterday and what's coming down the pipeline. So we're going to continue today going from factored form to standard form and maybe working through a little bit more difficult and more involved questions than we did on Thursday. So our first example today, we didn't see this yesterday where we had an actual number, another a value up front. And there's actually two ways to do this. So we're going to split our page in two. And we're going to do one way. So we'll say this is method number 1. And this would be to distribute first. And what I mean by distribute first is you are going to multiply this 2 into there first. Now you only do the first side of brackets, because that 2 is only attached to the x plus 1. So when we do that, 2 times x gives us 2x, 2 times 1 gives us 2, and then we still have the x minus 5. Now we need to expand that like we did yesterday. So we have to do FOIL, first, outside, inside, last. And when you do that, you are going to end up with 2x squared minus 10x plus 2x minus 10. Collect like terms, those are the ones in the middle. So 2x squared minus 8x minus 10. So there's method number 1. Method number 2. We are going to expand first. So FOIL first, if you will. So we're going to save that 2 for the very end. So what that looks like, 2 for the end. We're going to do our FOIL first. So we're going to do first, outside, inside, last. So we're going to be left with x squared minus 5x plus x, and then minus 5. Let's collect like terms first. So there's our like terms, that 2 still up front, minus 4x minus 5. And now you are going to distribute that 2 inside, which gives you 2x squared minus 8x minus 10. As you can see, we got the exact same answer either way you do it, as we should have. I am never going to force you to do it a certain way come task or assessment. It is purely personal preference, how you see it or what you like to do first. So if you like to do distribute first, multiply that 2 in, then FOIL, go for it. If you like to FOIL first, then distribute the 2 in, again, the choice is yours. If you were to wonder what my favorite is, just the way I am, I would tend to lean towards method number 2, but again, there's nothing wrong with doing number 1 either. So I want you guys to pick your favorite way to do it, or possibly both ways if you want to practice both ways, and expand this for us. I'm only going to take up the final answer so you can check what you got, and while you're doing that, provide you with some inspirational music. Okay, so we're going to take it up. If you're not actually done, that's okay. I wouldn't expect you to be done yet. Just pause the video right now, finish your solution, and then restart it. So if you did your math correct, your final answer should have been negative 2x squared minus 4x plus 16. Give yourself a high five if you got that right. Good work. Moving on. Now yesterday, or again earlier today, we looked at this. This kind of looks like vertex form. Now we don't have the k value. That's okay. We know from last week the k value is just 0 in this case. And when you square something, so when you square something, so let's say we had 2 squared. Really, that's the same thing as writing 2 times 2, which we know is 4. We're going to build off that principle. So we're going to build off this to expand that. So we're going to write 2 of them. So x plus 1, x plus 1. We know using FOIL, first outside, inside, last. So after you expand that, you should get x squared plus 2x plus 1. Now I skipped some of the steps there, doing the first outside, inside, last. If you're not comfortable skipping those steps, then go through and do them and just check your final answer. There is another way. There's a pattern to this. So this is actually called, right here, a perfect square trinomial. Trinomial, there's 3 of them, perfect square, x squared and 1 make perfect squares, and we know that because there's also a squared here. Now there is actually a discernible pattern to doing these quickly. Again, I'm never going to force you to do it the way I'm going to show you, no, but if you want to build off of shortcuts, then you can use this. So if we have something like this, so a plus b squared, that is always going to take on the general form a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. And if we follow our pattern, so this was my a value, this was my b value, so all we're doing is matching those 2 forms. This tells me that I should take my a value and square it. So take my a value and square it. What do I get? X squared. I'm going to skip the 2ab for now. If we go to the b squared, so right here, my b value, which is 1, this tells me to square it. What's 1 squared? 1. Now to get my middle term, 2ab, that just means 2 times a times b. In other words, multiply a times b and double it. So my a and b are x and 1. So when I multiply those together, what's 1 times x? 1x. And when I double it, I get 2x. So you could use that short form, that pattern, to expand things like this. If you're not comfortable with that, then you can stick to just write two of them and use FOIL. Let's try another one. I'm going to do this the short way for practice. If you don't like it, again, you could just write two of them and FOIL, you get the same answer exactly. Now this is a minus, you'll notice. That's okay, it still fits the pattern. The only thing that changes is we have a negative 2ab instead of a positive. That's okay. So using that shortcut, there's my a, there's my b. A squared, x, square it, x squared. I'll skip the middle again. B squared. Now b is 5, not negative 5. Now you could treat it as negative 5 if you want. It's going to do the same thing. But let's just stick with the positive, so just 5. 5 squared plus 25. Now to get the middle, multiply them together and double it. What's x times negative 5? Negative 5x. Double negative 10x. Done. Again, if you don't like it that way, the shortcut, write two of them. You'll get the exact same answer if you FOIL correctly. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward, pretty easy so far. Let's make it a little bit more difficult.
Michelle Coleman and Daniela Ferreira to the office, please. Michelle Coleman and Daniela Ferreira to the office. Thank you.
Now we have, or at least what's different about this one versus the other ones, we actually have an a value that's not 1. So we have 2 out front here. So what I'm about to show you right now is what not to do. Do not do this first. That would be bad. We know according to BEDMAS that you need to take care of the brackets and exponents before you multiply. So do not do that. If you do that, bad things are going to happen where you're going to end up in math purgatory on fire. So do not do that. Instead, what we are going to do is you're going to save the 2 till the end. You can write 2 of them if you want and expand or use FOIL. I'm going to use our shortcut already here again. You already have it. So we have a plus b squared. I know that gives me a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. There's my a, there's my b. So a squared, x squared, middle term, multiply them and double. 3 times x is 3x, double the 6x. B squared, square the 3 gives you 9. Now distribute that 2 in, and you're left with 2x squared plus 12x plus 18. As a quick check, if I was to ask you what the y-intercept is for that equation, what would you all say? Shout it out so I can hear you. Oh, 18, perfect. So most of you by now, that's pretty easy. Let's kick it up another notch. This is full-on vertex forms. This is basically we have built towards vertex form to standard form. So this has everything from last unit. We've got our a value, -2, it's not 1. It's got our vertex, -3 and -9. We're going to have to do some steps to convert that or to expand that into standard form. The first thing, again, we are not going to multiply that -2. We want to stay out of math out. So we're going to save that -2. We're going to use our shortcut. I'm not going to write the shortcut this time. You can refer to the previous examples, or again, if you are not comfortable with it, just write 2 of them and FOIL. Square the first term, x squared. To get the middle term, multiply them together and double it. 3 times x, 3x, doubled, 6x. Square the 3, the p-value, 9. And then don't forget about that negative 9 at the very end. So don't forget about that. Don't forget about that. And all of this right here leads to all of that right there. So that's what we've done so far. Just like last one, our next step, distribute that into everything. So negative 2x squared minus 12x minus 18, and then don't forget about that negative 9 on the back end. Collect like terms. Negative 2x squared minus 12x minus 27. And we have successfully changed vertex form to standard form. And if I ask you what the y-intercept is, it'll tell me negative 27. You're going to notice too, my a value, which was negative 2, is still my a value right here. If it wasn't, then you made a mistake somewhere. Any questions? Everyone think they can handle that on their own? So I would like you to try this one on your own. I'm only going to put up the final answer, and then you can check your work to see how you did and how you're getting this stuff. So change this from vertex form to standard form, and again, I'll provide you with some inspirational music. Okay, time's up. Again, I don't actually expect you to be done by now, but if you are, fantastic. If you're not, just pause it, wait till you're done, and take a look. So, the moment of truth. Our answer to Final Jeopardy here. Negative x squared plus 8x minus 13. Hopefully you got that right, and hopefully you wagered all your money on that to double it and win Final Jeopardy. The last thing we are going to do today is we are going to find the equation from a graph in standard form. And we're going to do it two ways. And so far we've only done this last chapter with vertex form. We are going to use standard form, or we want to get to standard form. So our first way, so this is going to be method number 1. This is going to be vertex to standard. So if I give you that parabola last unit, you would tell me the vertex, which is right there. You would tell me that has coordinates 1, 2. And if I asked you to put that in vertex form, you would say y equals a x minus 1 squared plus 2. We need to find our a value. Again, you have some points to pick, some nice points. We could pick that value, which is negative 1, 0, or we could pick that value, which is 3, 0. I'm going to pick the 3, 0 point. And if I do that, so we're going to sub that coordinate, 0 equals a, 3 minus 1 squared plus 2. 3 minus 1 is 2, 2 squared is 4, 4a plus 2. Bring that 2 over, becomes negative 2 equals 4a, divide both sides by 4, negative 1/2 equals a. So we did all that work. Now, as a double check, is it negative? Yes, opens down, that checks out. My step pattern looks like it could very well be down 1 over 2, so to speak. So, over 1, down 1/2, and so on. So, now we need to put this into standard form. So we're going to go back here. So y equals, I now know this. And I still have that. So that would be your work from last unit. We want to make that into standard form now. So I'm going to use my little shortcut. Square the first term, x squared, multiply them together. So negative x, double it, negative 2x, square the last term, and we still have that plus 2. And again, if you're not sure where I got that stuff in brackets from, I used the shortcut. If you don't like the shortcut, write two of them and then FOIL. Now you need to distribute that negative 1/2 in. So negative 1/2 x squared. And then negative 1/2 times negative 2 just gives you a positive x. And then 1 times negative 1/2 is negative 1/2. And then you have that plus 2 on the back end. Collect like terms. Negative 1/2 x squared plus x. And then 2 minus 1/2 is 1/2. Since I kept this as a fraction, I'm going to write it as plus 3 over 2. If you prefer decimals, then you could have wrote that as negative 0.5 and on the back end wrote 1.5. If I was to ask you what the y-intercept is, you would say 1.5 or 3 over 2. And does that look like it kind of matches our y-intercept there? Sure it does, halfway between 1 and 2. So there's method number 1, vertex to standard. Method number 2, we are going to do factored to standard, which is kind of what we were practicing earlier in this lesson and definitely the first lesson of the unit. So, factored form, that means we have to use the zeros. So y equals a. Now my zeros, where my graph crosses the x-axis, again that has coordinates negative 1, 0, and 3, 0. When it goes into your factored form, remember those are zeros. The x value is going to be opposite. So x plus 1 and x minus 3. And again, remember they're called zeros for a reason because they make your graph 0. So if I put negative 1 into my first bracket, what's negative 1 plus 1? 0. If I was to put 3 into the second bracket, what's 3 minus 3? 0. Just like with vertex form, I have to find my a value. I got to sub a point in. Let's sub the nearest point we know, which is our vertex. So we are going to sub our vertex. Keep in mind, you cannot sub your zeros as a point into your factored form. And from the previous example, we can't sub our vertex into vertex form. It's going to put the whole thing to 0. So if I put 1, 2 in, 2 equals a, 1 plus 1, 1 minus 3. 1 plus 1 is 2. So we have a, 2. 1 minus 3 is negative 2. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4a divided by negative 4. For people who like decimals, maybe I'll do decimals this time. So we have our a value. Let's go back to this. Y equals negative 0.5, x plus 1, x minus 3. From there, FOIL. I'm going to skip a step here, and you would be left with x squared minus 2x minus 3. And then distribute that 0.5 in. Negative 0.5 x squared plus x plus 1.5. We got the exact same equation we did last time as we should have, just different methods and with decimals. Hopefully there's no questions. If there are, feel free to hit me up on Remind or email or ask me on Monday when I'm back. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we're going to talk about factored form and factoring. Hopefully you're good with your multiplication tables. Thursday's your quiz, the Unit 4 test, November 23rd-ish. And then there is your seat work for tomorrow's class when you come in on Friday. 9 A, B, D, E, F, 10 B, D, F. Those have asterisks because they're challenge questions. If you don't get them, that's okay. And then 11, 12, 13, 15. And then try these 3 on the bottom here that have changed each from vertex to standard form. So lunch is just about over. I can hear some of you outside my door. Have a good Friday class and have a good weekend, and I will see you on Monday.